All right, so let's get started for today. Does someone just want to let me know they can hear me? I assume you can.
We can hear you.
Okay, good to go. So I just noticed that I haven't put up my Zoom meeting for the office hours after class. I'll do that as soon as I get back to my office. So if you need to talk to me, I'll be there from 9:30 till 10:30. You can get a hold of me then. So what we're going to talk about today is the theory behind deletion from a B-tree. As I mentioned, you're not asked to implement this in your assignment, but I do want you to understand how it works. And so we're going to go through that. Then we're going to talk about some variations of B-trees that try to get better performance than the basic B-tree algorithm. So are there any questions about that before I start? All right. So as with all trees, the key with B-tree deletion is that we need to try to do it in some manner that's as efficient as search or insert. So it can be slow, but it also has to maintain all the requirements, the constraints that we've put on B-trees about leaves all being in the same level, every node except the root has to be at least half full, and so on. All right. And so again, as with all tree algorithms, the way this actually works is through a set of required removal and then rotation required. Okay. So this is similar to deletion from a BSP. So if we're removing from a leaf node, we delete the key directly. And if we're removing from an internal node, we delete the key and promote its predecessor or successor. So predecessor, of course, is the key that comes immediately before the key we're deleting in order, and successor is one that comes immediately after. And you can find that by going right and all the way left as far as you can, or going left and then all the way right as far as you can to get either the successor or the predecessor, respectively. Okay? So in all cases, either deleting directly from a leaf or internally a key is being removed from a leaf node. Right? So if we're deleting directly from the leaf, it's being removed. If we're deleting from an internal node, what we're actually doing is we're stealing something from a leaf node to act as the predecessor or successor. So we can actually see both internal and leaf-based deletion as removing something from a leaf node. And we have to check that leaf node to make sure that it's still satisfying the requirements of a B-tree. Okay? So this leaves L keys in the leaf node. And if L is greater than the ceiling, greater than or equal to the ceiling of k over 2 minus 1, then we can stop. We can stop there because we know that, okay, so we've met the requirement for fullness of every node except the root being at least half full, so we're good. All right. If L is less than the ceiling of k over 2 minus 1, however, oops. the leaf is underfull. And we must rebalance to fix this. Okay? So if we don't have enough keys left in the leaf after we pull one out, we're going to have to reorganize the tree to try to fix that. And we want to reorganize the tree in a way that's going to be efficient. Okay? And so there are actually two ways that we rebalance. And we go for the easiest one first, and if we can't do that one, then we go for the next one. All right? So let me show you what those are. So the first is called borrow. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to check the leaf's left sibling, then its right sibling. If they exist, because they may or may not, to see whether either of those has more than ceiling of k over 2 minus 1 keys. Okay. So what we're doing basically is we're saying, all right, we're going to look to our left and right in the same level of the tree that we're at to our two siblings. And if either one of them has more keys than they need, we're going to ask to borrow one. And the way we're actually going to borrow one is we're not just going to grab it and pull it over. We're actually going to borrow one by taking a key from the sibling, pushing it up to our parent, and then taking something from the parent and pulling it down into us, giving us that extra key that we need in order to meet the requirements of fullness. All right? So if it does, we can borrow one of the siblings' keys. Without making it underfull. And that makes logical sense, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check, we're going to go and we're going to say, hey, somebody else have more keys than they need, we'll just grab one of yours. And you can afford to give it up because you don't need all of those, okay? So if we're borrowing from the left sibling, these are the exact steps that we go through. We first take the key in the parent node that splits the left sibling and the leaf. So there's a bunch of values in the left sibling, and then up in the parent node, there's a value that's greater than everything in the left sibling, but less than everything in the leaf. That's the node that we want to grab, or that's the value that we want to grab. Okay? This is called the split key. And we insert it into the leaf. And of course, it's going to be the first key in the leaf because everything in the leaf is greater than that split key, so the split key would go right at the front. Right? Second, we're going to replace the split key with the left sibling's largest key. So we take the last key in the left sibling and we replace it, we move it back into the position where this split key used to live, and now we're fine, right? Because for that key, still everything on the left is smaller, and still everything on the right is bigger. And so we're satisfying the basic B-tree ordering properties, okay? And so we're done. Once we've done that, we now have a situation where everything's good. So any questions about that before I show you an example of how that works? Okay, it's easy. So suppose I have the following order 5 B-tree. Feedback. And I want to delete F. Okay, so when I remove F, the problem is that we need at least 2 values in every leaf. And so by deleting from F, we're going to underflow. Okay. So we look left, we look right, we ask, do either of our siblings have more keys than they need? And indeed, the left sibling has 3 keys, but it only needs 2. So we can borrow from the left sibling. So the first thing we do is we find the split key, which is D, because D is the key that splits these 2, right? And we move it down here. So we would get A, B, C, and then there's sort of a hole there, G, and then we're going to get D, E, and F is gone, right? So we've moved the split key down to the leaf. And then next, we take a key from the sibling and move it up to that position that we just vacated. Okay, and that would be the result that we get is CG at the root, A, B, D, E, and HI on the bottom. So that is definitely a B tree. All of the constraints of that tree are satisfied. Every node has at least 2 values in it except for the root. And you can see that the parent splits things properly. So everything smaller than C is to the left, everything bigger than C is to the right. Everything smaller than G is to the left, everything bigger than G is to the right. And all the nodes are in ascending order, okay? So, any questions about that before I continue? Okay, so the obvious question is, yeah, that's all good and fine, but what happens if neither sibling has any extras to give to you? All right, and so we have to deal with that situation as well. What if, for example, we had the tree in its new configuration, and then we tried to delete, say, E? Well, A, B, and HI are already right at limit, so they're not going to be able to actually allow us to borrow any keys. So we're going to have to deal with that in a different way. So we use something called coalesce when that happens. Okay? If both siblings contain only k over 2 minus 1 keys, we can't borrow. instead, we coalesce the leaf with the left sibling and parent split key. So we go for a different strategy here. What we say is, all right, so the left sibling has exactly ceiling k over 2 minus 1 nodes, keys, sorry. I have one less than that in my leaf, and there's a split key. If I take all three of those and bundle them together, they'll fit inside a single node. So that's what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take the left sibling, the underfull leaf, and the split key, and I'm going to put them together, and that will produce a new node. So I'm going to coalesce, I'm going to fuse together 2 nodes plus a split key to produce 1 node. And I'm going to insert that back into the tree. Okay? So we first combine, whoops, goddamn running dogs. We combine the left sibling, the split key, and then the leaf into a node with, it'll have exactly k minus 1 keys, so it'll be completely full. Perfect. And then second, we remove the parent split key, and it's now empty right subtree. So here's the tree we had. Let's show an example of deleting D from this tree and see what happens, okay? So let's try removing D from our previous k equals 5, order 5 D tree. So I'll just copy over what we've got, which is C, G, A, B, D, E, H, I. And we're going to delete D, producing underflow. Okay, so you see when I delete D, I look left, I look right, there is nowhere I can borrow from. So instead of borrowing, I'm going to take the left sibling, the split key, and what's left in the leaf, and I'm going to create a new leaf node. And you can see it has exactly k minus 1 keys, 4 keys. All right? And then above, we remove the split key and the now empty left subtree, giving us this. Okay? And that is indeed a B tree in its current form. Any questions about that?
So in many ways, it's kind of the exact opposite of what would happen if you were to like be trying to add, like it's almost the exact opposite of when you would try to add D, of like how you would then re-promote C. Like it's almost the exact inverse behavior, correct?
Yes, that's right. And just like with insertion, there is going to have to be some checking done after we've finished this to see whether we need to recursively continue this process of under full nodes, right? So in this case, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so because like if if for instance CG wasn't the parent node and it had ones above it, you would have just removed it, and so now it's breaking that rule of K2 minus 1.
That's
And
right.
so now you have to go and see if it can now borrow keys from its siblings.
So you would do a borrow check, and if that didn't work, you would do a coalesce check. And you would just keep rolling up the tree until you either fixed it or you got to the root. And then at the root, you can actually have as many keys as you want. Or if you actually coalesce the last value from the root down, then you've just made the tree shorter.
Got it. Cool.
So let's write that down. So after coalescing, two checks must be made. First, if the parent node was the tree's root and is now empty, we make the coalesced node the new root. So if you think about it, if the parent node was the root and is now empty, that meant prior to being empty, it had a left subtree and a right subtree, and we took that left subtree and threw it away because we combined it with the leaf and the value that was at the root. So there's only one node at that level in the tree now, and so that can become the new root. Okay. And second, if the parent node is an internal node and is now underfull, we must recursively rebalance it using the same borrow or coalesce strategy. Okay, so actually deletion's not very complicated. It's, to be honest, it's very straightforward. You borrow from the left, you borrow from the right. Borrowing from the right is different only in the sense of where you take the values from. So rather than promoting the last value in the left sibling, you would promote the first value in the right sibling. Okay. But otherwise, and then the value that you pull down will go to the end of the leaf node instead of the front. But otherwise, it's exactly the same. And then coalesce is always just whatever it is. And so like I said, I could ask you to implement this. There's some housekeeping to do, but it's not hard, and I'm not going to do that. But I hope that you understand how deletion works, and you can see that, oh, okay, yeah. So given the height of the tree, and given the fact that we're doing sort of an operation, either borrow or coalesce at each level of the tree maximum, as we walk back up that path of log kn in order to correct, the amount of work required to do a deletion is exactly the same as the amount of work required to do an insertion or a sort. And so that's great. We can meet all the requirements with the same amount of work. And so all the operations on a B tree are going to take order log k of n. And so construction and maintenance of the tree is going to be highly efficient as long as k is large. Any questions about that? Okay, so let's look at a few extensions of B-tree that people have proposed. One is called B star tree, and one is called B plus tree. B star tree is a way of actually trying to improve space efficiency, and B plus tree is the actual type of tree that's normally used in a database. So they don't use the standard B tree. They normally use a B plus tree. Okay? So let's start with B star tree. And so this is just a B tree with a modified insertion algorithm. B star trees improve the storage utilization of internal nodes to approximately 2K/3. So we go from 50% to approximately 67%. And so increasing the minimum utilization means that we can fit more information in fewer nodes, and fewer nodes means that we're going to have shorter trees. And so in theory, this should help with overall tree height, which is going to help with overall number of seats required to actually find something. Search algorithm doesn't change. Still works exactly the same way, because the only constraint that's changing here is that you're going to get a 2K/3 fullness rather than a 1K/2 fullness. Okay. So this can postpone increasing height of the tree improving search performance in absolute terms. Okay. So this is the basic idea. The basic idea of a B star tree is to postpone splitting by redistributing keys when the node overflows to the left or the right sibling. Okay, so if you think about it, this is very similar to the way that the deletion algorithm works. So what we're saying is if I'm full and you're trying to add something to me, normally I would have to split it into 2 half-full pieces and then promote my median to the parent. But maybe instead of doing that, I can look to my left and look to my right and see if there's any space in either sibling. And if there's space in one of the siblings, I can give something to them to make space inside me so that I can actually accept the key that you're trying to insert. So I'm going to try to redistribute my values to my left and right siblings as long as I can to sort of postpone having to split until it's no longer possible. If my left sibling, my right sibling, and I are all full, then obviously I can't do any redistribution, and splitting is going to have to occur. Okay. So if a redistribution is not possible, two full nodes are split into 3 nodes. Each about 2/3 full. So this is compared to a B tree, which splits a full node into 2 half full nodes. Okay? So if you think about it, if you have 2 nodes that are full, and then you create 3 nodes that are 2/3 full, so there was sort of 6/3 in the 2 full nodes, and then if you get 2/3 plus 2/3 plus 2/3, you're going to get 6/3. So the nodes are going to be, keys are going to be distributed properly. But instead of going from 2 to 4, you're going from 2 to 3. And so that's where the improvement is coming from. So really the only question is, how do we do redistribution? And if we can't redistribute, how do we decide what we're going to keep in those nodes that are going to be partially full? Okay? Any questions about the basic strategy before I continue? Okay. So, if a leaf node with L equals K keys overflows, and that would be an overflow, right? Because remember you have space for only K minus 1 keys, so if you've got K keys, you've overflowed by 1. A sibling, and we're going to say the left sibling, has M less than K minus 1 keys. So if the number of keys in the sibling is less than K minus 1, that is, there's at least one available slot in that node, possibly more. Okay. We combine the sibling keys the split key and the leaf nodes keys. This produces L plus M plus 1 keys that we redistribute as follows. So this is a total number of keys. If I just grab the split key, everything in the left sibling and everything in the leaf that's overflowing, I'll have this many keys that I need to somehow distribute, some into this left sibling, some into the leaf, and then one up into the parent as the split key. It's going to be a new split key. Okay? So we leave the first floor of L plus M over 2 keys in the left sibling. And we replace the split key with the key at position L plus M over 2 plus 1. So the next key would be the split key. That makes sense. And then we store the last ceiling of L plus M over 2 keys in the leaf. Okay, so it's not as straightforward, or it's not as basic, I guess, as simply moving a key around, which we could do. What you're actually doing is you're trying to balance out how many keys are in the left sibling and the leaf so that you can defer having to do this redistribution again. If you just move one key, then you might have to redo it again on the very next insertion. And although it's not super expensive, it's certainly more expensive than just dropping a key into a leaf. And so since you're doing all this work, you may as well go ahead and try to be efficient about it for the future. And that's why it's also good to sort of create, usually you're going to create a separate data structure, just a separate array somewhere, and jam all the keys in there so that you can then very easily figure out, how to split that chunk of keys into these 3 pieces, 2 pieces plus 1 key, and then just hammer them into the right positions inside your B tree. Okay, and right redistribution is identical, except the first L plus M over 2 keys go in the leaf, and the last L plus M over 2 keys go in the right sibling. So it's exactly the same, except that you obviously put the first chunk in the leaf and the second chunk in the right sibling because you want to maintain order, right? Right sibling should have keys that are bigger than the ones in the leaf. All right, any questions about that before I show you what we do if there are only full left and right siblings? So no opportunity to do a redistribution. Okay. This is a good classroom. You can't actually see it because you're not looking out like I am. I can turn you around. You see now?
Yeah.
See that clock?
Yes.
I almost died from that clock. Seriously. So that clock used to be a clock that was hardwired into the power for the building, and for some reason it was broken, like it wasn't turning. And so this went on for a while, and then being the person that I am, I finally just lost my temper. And when that happens, nothing good ever comes of it. So I walked up there, I pulled it off the wall, and it had a cord hanging out of it. And I pulled on the cord, and it tore it out of the wall. I may have put some force on it. So anyway, I was looking at it, and I thought, well, this is dangerous because now we've got live wires. So I trimmed it off, and that caused fire, smoke, and a variety of melting things. My friend was helping me. He kept running away, but I told him, like, stop it, come back here. And so it turned out when I pulled the plate off the wall and looked inside, it was all wire knotted together. I could have just gone in there and unhooked it and pulled it apart. I didn't have to tear it out of the wall. But there was a lot of satisfaction in just destroying the thing. And so the IT people asked me, what happened to this clock? And I said, it fell down. That was not untrue. I didn't explain how it fell down though. So now we just have a battery clock up there. It's probably safer. If I get angry again, there's another one in the downstairs classroom. It's still working, but I mean, that doesn't mean I'm not going to tear it apart. I have to, there we go. That's one of those things where you do something and then you realize later, yeah, that was probably stupid. I could have hurt myself. Probably couldn't have killed myself unless it went through my heart, I guess. But from the positive and negative ground. But still, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. So electricity, unless you know what you're doing, it can be dangerous, especially in a building like this where it's hardwired in. So when I was a grad student, one of my friends, we had 2 labs. There was a light lab and a dark lab. So the light lab, the lights were always on. The dark lab, the lights were always off. And so people would come into the dark lab, which is where we were, and turn the lights on. And so my friend got irritated about this, as he was wont to do. And so I'm sitting in the dark lab one evening, and he walks in with this screwdriver. And I said, so what are you going to do with that? And he said, I'm going to fix this wall switch where the lights get turned on and off so that people can't come in and turn the lights on. And I asked him, do you think that's wise? And he said, I know what I'm doing. And I'm like, all right. So I kept working away, and he was dicking around with the light switch. And then all of a sudden, we're in a dark lab. There's this flash of light, like lightning has gone off, and this huge boom. And I turn around, and he's lying on his back about 6 to 8 feet from the light switch. And he had really fine hair. It was all standing up, so that was interesting. And I guess he touched something he shouldn't have. Fortunately, his screwdriver had a plastic handle on it, and so he hadn't killed himself. But he'd blown himself 6 to 8 feet back across the floor. And so he's lying there in this sort of semi-dazed state. And I look at his screwdriver, and there's probably this big divot, this big chunk of metal that's been sort of burned out of it. And he sort of staggers up. And I said, dude, are you okay? And I don't think he was all there. And he says, see those fuckers get that light back on now? And he staggered out of the room. And I thought, huh, that's interesting. But the saddest part of the whole story is that even though PlanOps was very slow at doing anything, they had somehow fixed that within 2 days. So the lights are coming back on again. So that's another example of, you look back on that and you think, it was probably dangerous. So I have no idea how I'm still alive. It's a strange how these random things happen. Anyway, so that's redistribution, plus what happened to the clock. So let's talk about what if they're both full. So if both siblings are full, we choose one. And again, I'm going to say the last sibling. Oh no, I went through this. I'm repeating myself. You should say something. I'm not entirely in my right mind. Feeling a little tired today, so. Should I repeat myself? No, I'm not repeating myself. So if they're both full, I'm not going to write that all out again. You do this. You produce a list of 2K keys that we redistribute into three new nodes. So first, you place 2K minus 2 over 3 ceiling keys in the left node. use the next key as the split key. You place the next 2k minus 1 over 3 ceiling keys in the middle node. And use the next key as a split key. And then you place the remaining (2k over 3) ceiling keys in the right node. Okay, so what you've done is you've actually created 3 nodes from 2, and so therefore you've increased the number of nodes in the parent node by number of keys in the parent node by 1, because you had a single split key for the original 2 nodes. Now you have 2 split keys for these new 3 nodes. And the 3 nodes are balanced as much as possible in terms of how much they contain. Okay? And obviously, if adding 2 split keys to the parent overflows it, which is possible if it was already full, you do the same redistribution strategy. To rebalance the tree. Okay, and of course it's possible that you'll split all the way up to the root, which overflows, and when that happens, you're going to actually promote up a key or keys, split keys, so that you're going to create a new root node. All right, which is fine. That's just increasing the height of the tree by 1. Okay. Any questions about that? I'm going to try to show you a quick example before we finish up today. All right, so let's see if this actually works, how it works. It does work. It's just a question of whether I can make it work or not. So we're going to have an order 5 B tree, and we're going to insert in this order LAN MDF, LAN MDF. GHCEB, IJK. Okay, so the first 3, LANMD, AD, LMN, go in order into the node, and now we've overflowed, right? So we actually need to split this into 2 nodes, and we're going to promote L. So we actually get L, AD, MN. So this is an example of where the root node splits. Okay? No siblings to look at, so you just split it, promote. Okay? So now we're going to have L, and then when we add in FG, we're going to get A, D, F, G, and then H is going to go in there, right? So again, overflowed. But this time we actually have space over here in our right sibling, so we can actually redistribute. So what we actually do is we grab this entire set of nodes, and then we go through that set of equations that I showed you to say how many nodes to put in each side. And it turns out that we'll get G promoted as a split key. We'll have ADF on this side, and we'll have H, L, M, N over here. Okay?
Dr. Haley, can I clarify one quick thing real fast?
Sure.
Was this an order 5 or an order 6 tree?
It should be an order 5 tree. So when we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 entries in here, that's when we hit overflow, because we're only allowed 4 nodes per, 4 keys per node.
Okay, I was just trying to make sure that that was actually like what caused the overflow versus that being like it's just okay there. I was having trouble. Thanks.
Yep. So this would be the overflow bad boy, just like this one here. So I'm only showing the point where we hit overflow and then do the split. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Yep. And so next we would have G. And then over here, we're going to have A, C, D, E, F as we insert. So this is the one that's overflowing us. And then we have H, L, M, N. So you can see at this point, we have no left sibling. Our right sibling is full. So we can't do the redistribution where we just sort of like push some values over. We're actually going to have to take these and split 2 nodes into 3. So what we're going to get here is we're actually going to get AC. We're going to promote D, then we're going to get EFG, we're going to promote H, and we're going to get LMN. Okay? So that's the second redistribution strategy I showed you. And so you can see that we've increased the number of nodes in our parent by 1. There's space to hold that. And we've done the best that we can to balance out how many keys we're putting in each of these 3 nodes that we created. Okay? So then we have BH, ABC, EFG, and then as we insert, we end up with I, J, L, M, N. So now we've overflowed on this side. And so there is space here, so we can actually do the redistribution without having to increase the number of nodes in the parent. But we are going to have a different split node here. The split node is actually going to be I. So we're going to get EFGH, and we're going to get JLMN. Okay? And then the last entry we're going to put in there is K. And so, of course, that's going to blow us up again. We have enough space here if I'm really small. So ABC, E, F, G, and then we get J, K, L, M, N. And so we again borrow from our left side. And so we're going to get D, ABC, sorry, EFGH, my bad. So we can't borrow, so we're going to have to take these 2 nodes plus the split key, combine them together and create 3 nodes. So we're going to get D, G is going to be the split node here, EF, and then HIJ, and then another value up here, K, and then LMN. And that would be the order 5 B tree that results from the B star algorithm. And so you can see that every node is about 2/3 full. Right. And if I actually did a corresponding B tree on this, it would be actually, I believe, 1 level taller. Okay, so I have to go through and actually do the insertions, but I'm pretty sure if I did a B tree on this, that's why I picked this choice. It would end up being 1 level taller than this one, even though it contained the same values, even though it had the same space in every node for keys. Because of the insertion strategy, it would just end up bigger. Okay. So this was an algorithm proposed by Don Knuth. Don Knuth is sort of one of the grandfathers of data structures, and so if you look at the standard reference text for anyone who does research in computer science, searching and sorting is one of them. It's called the, I can't remember what the exact series is called, but basically he's writing a series on, well, he's been doing that for 40 years now, more than 40 years, writing a series on basic algorithms in computer science. And so a lot of these things like B star and some of the hashing and other things like that, he actually invented when he was going through this. So any questions about any of this? Okay. So I will put the Zoom notification out for the office hours in about 2 or 3 minutes as soon as I get back to my office. Otherwise, I'll look forward to seeing you if you're available on Wednesday, and we will continue our discussion of variations of B-trees. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Father.
Thank you.
Thanks.